This is the Johnny Cleveland Podcast, all things Cleveland sports, with your host, John Suchan. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Johnny Cleveland Podcast. I'm your host, John Suchan, and we are the Fanatical Elves Network, part of Fans First. Appreciate you being here. If you're watching us right now live on Facebook, on YouTube, or the X, thank you. Steve Hemrich, a colleague of ours here at the Fanatical Elves Network. Shout out to his show, There's a Gleam. Appreciate Steve letting us use his Twitter or X page to get out all of our shows. So thank you very much. If you have a comment, you want to talk about what we're going to talk about tonight, which of course we're a Cleveland Browns podcast. So we're going to hone in on the Cleveland Browns, and we all love talking endlessly about our beloved Brownies. They've been in the news all the time, and this last week was no different after the game on Sunday where the Browns won on a dramatic last-second field goal by Andre Schmidt. The Browns fired Kevin Stefanski Monday morning, Black Monday. We all kind of thought it might be coming down the pike, and it did. There were different reports going into that Monday, yes or no, and the win in Cincinnati was great, and you could sense and you could feel how the players for the Brownies and Kevin Stefanski felt. There was a very emotional. Obviously, there were some other things going on in that game. Myles Garrett got his 23rd record sack, most sacks in a single NFL season by any defensive player, any NFL player ever. And to all of you who are crying about or suggesting that Myles Garrett's record is not as good as Michael Strahan's or that stupid player in Pittsburgh, you can kiss my ass. That has nothing to do. I mean, he had 200 less snaps to get that record in. So there's not even a contest there. And I imagine Myles Garrett will probably break the record again just to prove a point because he can, and he's the best defensive player in the NFL. Hands down, he's going to be in the Hall of Fame. He secured that certainly by getting this 23rd sack in this season. He'll be going in like season number 10. So he has a lot in front of him. Bruce Smith, I think, holds the all-time record of sacks somewhere around the 190 mark, and he was in the league for 19 years. So I think Myles Garrett's going to get that record in record time. We'll see what happens next year. He got off to a good start this year. He was pretty consistent. I know there are a lot of people that have complained about Myles Garrett having moments where he didn't do a lot early in the season, or he was doing some things in the middle of the season, and then by the end of these seasons, he would kind of tail off on his sacks. And listen, like when I was at the game again with our colleague Joel Cade, who does What the Elf Is That? He continually observe, and most of you watch the games too, how these teams, especially like the Squealers and the Bungles, geared all of their offense to go to the right. You know, they were playing away from Myles Garrett the majority of the time. And really for the last 4, 5, 6 games, all the teams were kind of doing that. It's pretty amazing when you have one player dominate and all those other teams that are going up against the Browns defense every week, they are gearing up to go against Myles Garrett. And he was tremendous. And, you know, I don't know about you, but just listening to him this year, his body language, the way that he's talking, you know, they have that microphone. Interesting, right? That he has a mic, he's mic'd up a lot. What happened back in the day when was he not mic'd up when he and Mason Rudolph went at it and, you know, Myles tried to tear off the head of Mason Rudolph? Obviously, Mason Rudolph said something horrible to Myles Garrett. Doesn't excuse what Myles Garrett did, and he was suspended, rightfully so. At the time, it was indefinitely, but the league, the NFL, tries to say, well, there's not any audio. That's bullcrap. We all know that that's bullcrap. So anyway, fast forward now back here to the present, and Myles Garrett really should be given a round of applause. And really, at the game, there were many Browns fans in attendance. There were Cincinnati fans. There were many Cincinnati fans that acknowledged it, but there were also stupid Bungles fans who were, obnoxiously rude when Myles Garrett said that. Speaking of rude, Zach Taylor, the Bungles head coach, and Jamar Chase, who's just a freaking moron. Those guys are such crybabies, right? Come on, like, you go back in the day, right? Browns fans, you hear stupid ass Sam Weiss, and I know he's deceased and all this now, but him saying, "You don't live in Cincinnati, you don't live in Cleveland, you live in Cincinnati." This is the mentality of so many Cincinnati Bungles players, fans, the organization. I mean, the pregame there in Cincinnati had all that. They had Paul Brown. They, Paul Brown got fired by Art Modell, which we hate Art Modell, obviously, and there was a lot of respect for Paul Brown, but Paul Brown did all these things despite the Browns and same colors, same state, all that, all these things. And then you just get other knuckleheads like Sam Weiss to come along. And then you just get stupid players now like Jamar Chase, who they have talent, but they're wasting it in a team and an organization that is just completely boneheaded. They don't pay their players, or they pay some of them, but not the rest of them. They're not organized. They don't shovel the snow from their stadium seats like they're supposed to. Their their practice facility is an outdoor facility, like literally in an alley next to the Paul Brown Stadium or whatever. It's crazy. If you go look, we walked to the stadium the other day on Sunday, and I got to see where they have their practices. It's a joke that it's a terrible uh, practice area, and what they do with all that is just very silly. So, it's funny that not funny, but the fact that the Bungles got to the Super Bowl, in 2022 is I mean, just crazy because they really are very dysfunctional. Everybody wants to use the word dysfunction with the Browns, but there are so many other NFL teams that are so dysfunctional, if we want to use that term. I mean, the Jets, the Raiders, I mean, all these teams are just a mess. And I know that the Browns look like a mess half the time, and even locally here to our local media and nationally, but we have a lot of things going for us. And so I know now with this um, coaching search and all of this, there's a lot of conversation. Well, is the Browns job an attractive one? I've seen people say it's the least attractive one, despite the fact that you have the best defensive player in the league in Myles Garrett, despite that you have numerous rookies that had a spectacular season this year for the Browns. And yes, the Browns only won 5 games, but that's a lot in part to the rookies like Shador Sanders, like Carson Schwarzenegger, like Mason Graham. Now, before we get it more into the whole conversation of the coaching search, I do let's pause here for a quick commercial break. I'll come back from that. We're going to talk a little bit about these Brownies. Some of the conversations have been being had about players like Shador Sanders, and then we'll talk about the coaching search. We'll be right back. Hey, thanks for coming back here to the Johnny Cleveland podcast. Okay, so I've seen it all, and colleagues that I work with here in the Fanatical Elves, fans out there, local media people are all over the place talking about, what they saw in players like Shador Sanders. And I know there are a lot of you out there that after watching Shador Sanders are not impressed. And I'm not going to go away from saying I I wasn't surprised that I was surprised there were moments this season where when he played that weren't very good, but there were other things that were happening that were very good. I think I had the best way I can describe it, and if it is frustrating when you see local people in the media, and I've said this too because I yes, factually, Shador Sanders was drafted in the fifth round. We all know that. It will be talked about until he ends his career, and I think he has a long career ahead of him. But the conversation has been spinning around and around and around amongst fans and people that analyze this team about Shador Sanders and that fifth round label. It's ridiculous, in my opinion, when you go back and you talk and you look at all the factors. He was targeted to be in was going to be the top pick in the NFL draft, and then he fell, and he fell, and he fell, and it was crazy, and everybody has talked about it endlessly. Do I think he's a fifth round pick? Absolutely not. Do I think he should have been drafted somewhere in the top picks, or if not the first round, at least the second or third? Absolutely yes. So there is this conversation about people, who say, well, he's a fifth round draft pick. And then I heard somebody on locally 92.3, they were talking about, well, if you said that, then obviously um, you don't, or you hate Shador, or you just don't know football. Now, I will say this, that there are a lot of people out there that I hear that continually want to bring up he's making progress. He's a fifth round draft pick. That's what he is. Yes, he is a fifth round draft pick, but that's bogus. Honest. I mean, that's factually again what happened. I get it, but I mean, it's not that you don't know football, but it's funny how people, because it's obvious when you watch. Factually, he's a fifth round draft pick, but if you watch the games and and not everybody watches the games, we do here on the Fanatical Elves. There's a lot of true diehard fans that are really analyzing this all the time. But what Shador, despite I know some of you will point to he has 10 interceptions and only 7 touchdown passes, or he's only throwing the ball 58%. His completion rate needs to be better. Well, for God's sakes, the kid knows that. For God's sakes, the kid wasn't given any time to, prior to his starting the last 7 games, he really wasn't involved. There was all that conversation the first 2 months of the season where he was working out on the practice field and not with the main team, all this stuff. Now, I get it that the kid needed to improve and get better. And I don't think that Stefanski and Shador didn't get along. I'm sure that they did, but I also think it's interesting when you listen to Shador the day before Stefanski was fired, how he described how he and I did how we got to pause here. Heard a little bit of a not sure what that was. There was a noise in the background. Hopefully, it's nobody in the house. um, so there obviously Shador and Coach Stefanski had a good rapport. I'm sure that was the case, but just listening to Shador in those moments right before Stefanski was fired, you certainly get a sense of that the two of them didn't probably see eye to eye. And Shador will describe that if you listen to him, how he learned from Stefanski, and I think they learned together how to kind of coexist and work together because obviously how Shador goes about his business as a football player and learning the game was probably something that probably Coach Stefanski had to work a lot at figuring out, and it took a bit. So that's where so right now, we some of you out there are like dead set on saying, well, now because Stefanski's fired, Shador, is he going to get is he going to be committed to? Is the Browns organization going to commit to him? Obviously, when Andrew Berry and Jimmy Haslam spoke, or Andrew Berry specifically spoke about it, he did not like turn over the keys to the car to Shador. Obviously, they know they're bringing in a new coach, and obviously, they want that coach to have input on what happens at the quarterback position. But those of you who are dissing and suggesting that Shador doesn't have a shot is just absolutely fascinating and silly. In my opinion, it's like the kid has worked his ass off in a short amount of time, and he has a lot of room to improve. But the upside, like I was talking to my son earlier today, and you've probably seen this too. And for those of you who are Dylan Gabriel fans, just if you're a Dylan Gabriel fan, you might not want to listen to this because we're Dylan Gabriel, I can't see him on this team moving forward. I mean, I know he's a rookie. They'll probably keep him somewhere, but I mean, he's not a starting quarterback. It frustrates me when I hear people talk about Dylan, comparing the two, him and Shador, talking about Dylan not being a starting quarterback and then Shador not being starting quarterback. I'm like, Shador just went 7 games and went 3-4. He won 3 games in the National Football League with little practice, with little time to prepare because, they were playing musical chairs with the quarterback situation in Cleveland. So now you've got Shador. I hope whoever the Browns bring in that they give him an opportunity as they should. That kid worked his butt off and it's just one of those things that has to I would hope that I would hope the organization recognizes that. Obviously, there's also this conversation about Deshaun Watson. And then there's this other part with the Deshaun Watson situation. There's people out there that are saying, well, now Deshaun Watson will start. If Andrew Berry stayed, remember that Jimmy Haslam talked about that and his decision making, and there isn't any intent currently by the Browns organization, the way it's built, that they're going to be playing Deshaun Watson, despite what you hear from a lot of people that aren't paying attention really to what's going on here with the Cleveland Browns. So we'll see. So there is this coaching search starting now for the Brownies, and they've got their defensive coordinator Jimmy Schwartz and their offensive coordinator Tommy Rees, who are scheduled to both be interviewed tomorrow, according to several reports. People are speculating all over the place. Some people are saying that Andrew Berry said in the press conference the other day that, Stefanski had little experience as a head coach and because he was in Minnesota for 14,000 years. And yet the Browns, made him their head coach. So some people are speculating that it's going to be Tommy Rees, even though Tommy Rees has little experience at anything, that he might be the go-to. Now, there are a lot of you out there, including myself, who I think when we talk about Jim Schwartz, I know some people are bothered by the idea because Jim Schwartz had a bad season or two in Detroit, which was a decade ago, that somehow that's going to play a factor in how a head coach is going to be here in Cleveland. I don't think that that's the case. I mean, everybody changes, everybody learns. Everyone's, if you're a coach, you've been in the league, you learn things along the way. I would be very comfortable if they promoted Jim Schwartz to head coach. You, I don't know. Do you keep Tommy Rees? Does he keep Tommy Rees if they go through the interview process? I don't know. I mean, it would make the most sense to me if they promoted Schwartz. Tommy Rees was he kept Tommy Rees at offensive coordinator, and you maybe you bring in another defensive coordinator that Schwartz or somebody that he could work with, that he could coordinate things. He could maybe run the defense himself, but bring in somebody else that he would trust. I think the players in the defense would love Schwartz. I think Denzel Ward talked about that the other day. So we'll see. There are a couple other names that have been dropped as far as the Browns having made contact. I was going to pull those up real quick. And again, thanks again for following us here on the Fanatical Elves Network. Tomorrow night we'll have the Fanatical Elves show with Steve Gill and Sam Britton and myself. So tune into that tomorrow night at 7:30. And then Friday we'll have before that, we've got Rod Bloom with his Brown Blitz tomorrow night as well. I think 9 o'clock around that time. And Friday we got the Bernie River Browns talk, the last Bernie River Browns talk with Lou Marconi. So tune in for that. Okay. Let's look here. Maybe. Yeah, so there's the big thing that happened. We all have been talking for the last 24 hours in not in Cleveland, but in Baltimore, was that John Harbaugh was fired or was let go in Baltimore after 18 seasons. John and Jim, his brother who coaches the Chargers, were born in Ohio. They were born in Toledo. Their parents were married in Cleveland. They attended a Browns football game, from the story goes, after the ceremony. They're diehard Browns fans. But then I think they moved. They were up in Ann Arbor. They went to high school up in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Obviously, we know the story about Jim being the head coach at Michigan for a while. So we'll see what happens. But there are a lot of suggestions that with the Browns, go after Harbaugh. I mean, he was there for 18 years. I was looking at some of these stats for him. Let's see here. Harbaugh was there for 18 years. He collected a record of 180 wins and 113 losses, with 12 out of the 18-year playoff appearances. Out of the 18 years, 12 playoff appearances, and 6. That's right, 6 AFC North titles. The Browns haven't had a title since 1994. It's been 32 years. No, 32 years? Yeah, 30. Am I doing my math right? Yeah, 32 years since the Browns have had a title of any sort. Ugh. The Ravens went 13-11 in playoffs under Harbaugh, winning the Super Bowl back in 2012. And who was the quarterback then? Joe Flacco. It sounds like all hell was breaking loose in Baltimore and that he had lost the locker room. There was a video circulating today when John Harbaugh went to go shake Mike Tomlin, the coach of the Pittsburgh Squealers, hand. Lamar Jackson was right there, and the two of them, John Harbaugh and Lamar Jackson, completely ignored each other. Very evident that the two of them are probably sparring. And so with that, there is this conversation. Well, would Harbaugh come here to Cleveland? I think a lot of Browns fans would really find that appealing, attractive. It would be like, okay, the Browns, we've struggled with those wins. He has a record of success, does John Harbaugh, and I think it would be very cool. A lot of fans were kind of talking about it. We've all been talking about it for the last 24 hours. Okay, so the other part of this was that he got fired because he wouldn't part ways with offensive coordinator Todd Monken. Now, Todd Monken was here in Cleveland before. I'm trying to remember the whole scenario there, but he's been here with the Browns in the past. But Harbaugh didn't want to part ways with Monken. So now, what if the two of them came over together, right? Tommy Rees would have to be gone, but Todd Monken and John Harbaugh come over here to Cleveland. Now, Todd Monken is being interviewed. He was requested. There was a request to interview him by the Browns. I don't have a date on that yet. They do have interviews scheduled with Jim Schwartz and Tommy Rees tomorrow. The Browns have also reached out to Bengals offensive coordinator Dan Pitcher. He has been the offensive coordinator there in Cincinnati for a year or two. Before that, he was the quarterback coach with Joe Burrow. They've also reached out to the defensive coordinator out there in Seattle with the Seahawks, Adam Durden. Adam Durd. So the Seahawks have had a really solid defense over the last couple of years. Anyway, there you go. That's kind of where things are at right now. There's, I'm sure, going to be more things coming out over the next few days. If they're interviewing Schwartz tomorrow and Reese, we might get a little bit of dirt out there in social media, La La Land, and I would suspect by sometime next week, at the very latest, the following week, we'll have a coach. It was interesting. I saw some various things in La La Land on the X, and some knucklehead was giving their predictions on where these coaches are going to land. Now, this guy said Harbaugh will go to the Giants. Kevin Stefanski will go with the Atlanta Falcons. Now, Kevin Stefanski was being interviewed by the Giants today. Mike McCarthy would go over to the Tennessee Titans. Now, I did hear Kevin Stefanski also has an interview with the Tennessee Titans next week. He liked Cam Ward when he was coming out of the draft. Cliff Kingsbury is rumored to be going to the Raiders, according to this guy. Brian Flores to the Ravens. Clint Kubiak to the Cardinals. And this guy has Jesse Minter to the Browns. Now, Minter is the offensive coordinator out there with the Chargers with Harbaugh. He and Harbaugh worked together when they were at Michigan, and there have been teams that have reached out about Jesse Minter. So we'll see. He was a defensive coordinator. So if Schwartz isn't brought in, maybe Jesse Minter could take over. So we'll see what happens with that. But that was one suggestion. The other, I was listening to another podcast. Former quarterback Ryan Fitzpatrick, who's played in for every team under the sun, was talking about his time in Miami, and he was describing Brian Flores, who kind of became the hot name in the last few days with these coaching searches. But he's telling us that I'll just read what the quote was. He says, the further removed from when we got from his tenure in Miami, the more the kind of people will forget about how that ended. It was ended very bitterly. I think he's going to have a really hard time if you're interviewing for jobs, because I think he's burned a lot of bridges. I think he alienated himself from the entire staff. People described him as a dictator, and he ruined a lot of relationships in the NFL. According to this is a quarterback Ryan Fitzpatrick. Then Ryan's played for a lot of teams, so I find that interesting when he talks about somebody like Brian Flores. He seems like the popular name, but there was a lot of crap going on down there in Miami. So who knows at this point, right? We're just going to let the Browns organization do this. I think that's part of the other thing with everything here is that Stefanski was fired and Barry is still here. And I think some people thought, including myself, that the two of them should be fired together. If they were going to be fired, do it together. They didn't. So, you could tell in that press conference with Andrew Barry that it was hard for him. It was awkward because I think he and his family have developed a good bond because I think their kids are the same age and things like that. So I'm sure that there's a relationship like that. And I think Andrew Barry wanted to emphasize that in the press conference. He was almost on the verge of tears, it seemed like, a moment or two in that presser. I'm sure it's a very difficult decision. But they held on to Andrew Barry. But some of the things that were talked about Andrew Barry by the owner, Jimmy Haslam, were accurate, but also kind of overlooking a lot of the sort of kind of stupid moves. I found it interesting, Andrew Barry mentioning that they need to get better on offense, but to do that, he said, don't be surprised if one or two of these better players on offense, and I'm speculating, well, who the hell is that? Because we don't have anybody good on offense except for maybe our tight end, David Njoku, over the years that might leave, but he was going to leave probably anyway. Anywho, so we'll see. We'll see. I think that they should have fired both of them, and the owners should have just brought in a whole new collection of things. But this way, you're keeping some people in play, if they decide that they interview Schwartz and bring him in, I think that, like I said earlier, I think that would be a really good positive move, especially for the players on defense, because they like Jim Schwartz, they trust him. I think that group has really excelled. And when you see the euphoria and you see how players like Myles Garrett have been over this course of the season, I honestly, right, guys? I mean, think about Myles Garrett just for a second. I mean, Myles Garrett has been kind of a pain in the ass on and off in his career. He has done some stupid, boneheaded things. He has said some stupid and boneheaded things in pressers. And this season, I mean, he was having a hell of a season to begin with, but just his whole aura, his whole demeanor, I think he's kind of learned more about himself. Obviously, it's almost been a decade now that he's played for the Cleveland Browns, and people mature, people grow up a little bit, especially when they're in your early 20s and you get into your late 20s and your 30s, you kind of grow up a little bit. So that's probably what just happens naturally for somebody like Myles, but it has been a positive thing to see a player like that. And I know, he wanted to be traded last year. That really set a lot of us off and pissed us Browns fans off, rightfully so, because Myles was being greedy. The fact that he came back, it's interesting. People speculate about all of that, but in the end, the season is over. Myles Garrett had a hell of a season. The Browns defense played pretty good. I think someone said they finished fourth in the rankings defensively. The Browns offense got better. That was the thing I was going to bring up earlier. I forgot to mention it when we were talking about Shedeur. When I was talking to my son about Shedeur, and I think it's just a very easy observation. And anybody who knows, like we said, anybody who knows anything about football or just has two eyes can see that when Shedeur was in the game, the Browns offense, I know it wasn't spectacular, but he did have the ability to get the ball down the field with his team. And you didn't see any of that with Dillon Gabriel, though he kept talking about that week in and week out, how this Browns team couldn't move the ball outside of the first drive. The Browns moved the ball. And I think we also need to be giving credit where credit's due. And I've seen and heard people talk about Shedeur, manufacturing that last drive. Well, hell's bells. He manufactured it. Fine, it's good play calling, but you got to give the quarterbacks who's running those plays and executing those plays the credit he deserves. Might be good play calling, but it's also a combination of those things. And I think that's where a lot of people who don't really think a lot of Shedeur Sanders and maybe never will, I find that's the part where I think in the long run, if you let this kid Shedeur continue to get better, work with the first teamers, get an off season, do some more training, I think the sky's the limit with this kid. And you saw some good things, but you saw some bad things in this last game. But like my son and I talked about, there were multiple plays this season where Shedeur was getting the ball down the field, putting the Browns in position to score. And they didn't score a whole bunch on Sunday, but they did enough. They did what they needed to do to win the game. And to see that confidence and to see a player like Shedeur on the sideline after that last drive, and if you saw him mic'd up talking about his buddy Andre Schmitz making the kick to win the game, he kept mentioning, yep, proving those doubters wrong, proving those doubters wrong. I mean, the kid has a confidence and an ability to talk to his teammates that is light years ahead of. I mean, it's where people don't want to give him credit in the maturity area, but that's where I see him only getting better, and he already has it. The way that he presents himself at press conferences, all of this is good, and he's learned that over the years. Having his father, I keep mentioning, is with Dion, his father, Primetime. When you watch your family, you watch your dad go through all these things over the years, you pay attention if you're a kid. And Shadeur's not like Primetime in a lot of ways, and I think a lot of people like to put them together, and that's why a lot of you don't like Shedeur, because you're constantly reminded about Primetime, and a lot of you just have never liked Primetime. So because you don't like Primetime, a lot of you out there who continually dismiss Shador, it's primarily because I believe you just don't like Dion. You can prove me wrong if you want, but um, I'm not gonna. You're not gonna convince me that that's why some of you out there just don't like Shador. So I think Shador has a hell of a career. If the Browns want to let him go or he goes somewhere else in the next few years, I don't see him not having success. And so if you're a Browns fan, 10 years from now and you're going to be watching Shador play for another team, so be it. Tried to tell you. So, all right. Tomorrow night, we'll have the Fanatical Elves show tomorrow night, Thursday night. Rod Bloom will be doing his Browns Blitz. Again, thanks to Steve Hemmerich. He had his There's the Gleam show that's out now on X. It's out on Apple. It's out on Spotify. Anywhere you listen to your podcast. Shout out to Hemisphere Coffee Roasters. They shake the hand of the farmer. If you buy their coffee off and click on the link on the RX page, you shoot back 15% to us here at the network. We appreciate that. Also, shout out to Cleveland Spotlight, the bar out there on the lakeside, just 5 minutes west of downtown. Great little location, sports bar there. Not a sports bar, but a bar. Lots of music, lots of things going on there. So check them out, Spotlight Cleveland. All right, folks, have a very good rest of your evening. Go Browns. And remember, too, that's right, keep smiling. See ya.